That's loud and clear for everybody? So we've now hit 4 o'clock. Thank you for your patience between 3:30 and 4. I know some people came a little bit earlier. I hope the coffees made the wait worthwhile. So welcome to the Jaglom Auditorium. Frankly, when I stepped in, immediately made me think that I was in the Starship Enterprise as we're sort of going off into space. And having read an article this morning about black holes and space and observation of quantum phenomena, I think we're in a great spot. It's also as close to being Captain Kirk, I think, as I'm ever going to be. So welcome to the session, and I think we've got some fantastic things in store. So getting out of my Captain Kirk outfit and into my one as an employee at Classic, which is a company focused on quantum computing and algorithm generation. We work very closely with all kinds of industries. I think what we're going to see today is a fantastic example of the types of issues that come to fore. Certainly from a security perspective, given the amount of government money, going into quantum, and I think many times when I speak to folks less familiar, actually one thing I want to check before we kick off, if we were to do a sort of a test of the room, if you're very familiar with quantum, could you raise your hand? Right, so for those who are speaking after me, that's about 10%, and who has barely any sort of quantum background or experience? Okay, so that'll help us perhaps to pitch things, so we'll try and tone it accordingly. But with the amount of government money going in, obviously some of these governments are friendlier than others, and there's a lot of interest in how one might want to regulate this industry, and if it's at all possible, and is it developing too quickly. But we'll certainly get to hear about some of the approaches being taken to mitigating that. On the enterprise side, it's very much not like what they say about teenagers. Everybody's talking about it, but nobody's doing it. A lot of folks are doing it, and we see this across the whole spectrum of industries, whether it's manufacturing, it's logistics, pharma, and particularly, I think, relevant for today. We have a session on and networks and how they are affected and are beginning to look at the opportunities and, of course, as well, at the threats that quantum presents. So the journey today is going to touch upon things that relate to what is shaping up to be a very exciting and promising new era, whether it's computing, communications, security, or threats to that security. And the journey we'll be taking today will take us from cryptography, through cybersecurity in general, to telcos and networks, and then we'll have some thoughts about how we can perhaps make ourselves more ready for this era, and perhaps you'll be able to leave the room with some ideas of what we'll be doing as we go forward. So I would like to take that opportunity to introduce our next speaker. We're going to be hearing from Omri, a PhD candidate in computer science at Temple University, researching the intersection between cryptography and quantum computation. And his current work focuses on the design of classical cryptographic protocols with post-quantum security and cryptographic protocols that utilize quantum computation and aim to achieve abilities that are impossible in the world of classic computers.
Hi everyone. So in this short talk, I'll tell you a bit about the basics of post-quantum cryptography. Yes. We will understand what is post-quantum cryptography. This one? Perfect. What is post-quantum cryptography? Why it might be relevant even today, and just a little bit of the technical basics behind post-quantum cryptography. So if you're coming to this talk, you might previously heard the fact that there is a strong connection between quantum computers and cybersecurity. Even more specifically, you might hear that this ambiguous fact that if we have a large-scale, fully functional quantum computer, most of the cybersecurity in practice today is broken. So let's start with understanding exactly how. So if we have we look at the internet, all of the communication, we assume that is secure because for once it is encrypted, most of it, and what enables in a very small nutshell this security, this assumption is cybersecurity technology or cybersecurity software. If we go one level below cybersecurity software, what cybersecurity technology and software implements is cryptographic algorithms. This is the more like fundamental part behind cybersecurity. And if we go even one more level down, the essence of cryptographic algorithms, the hardness, like the security behind cryptographic algorithms is captured by the hard mathematical problems, very special kind of hard mathematical problems. And if you go back to our context of why quantum is a threat to cybersecurity, and again, cybersecurity is the top layer, and all of the layers, like the top layer is based on the layer before, and so on and so forth. And if we look on pre-quantum technology, then we have the cybersecurity software that is pre-quantum technology. This cybersecurity software is based, among other things, this is a huge oversimplification, but it's based on algorithms, cryptographic algorithms, like RSA, L-Gamal encryption, and many, many other algorithms. And the point is that most of these algorithms are based on the hardness of one particular problem, which is integer factorization. So if integer factorization is not hard, we don't have security for these algorithms, and if we don't have security for these algorithms, we don't have cybersecurity, in a nutshell. So integer factorization is a very easy to state computational problem, and the input to somebody that's trying to solve integer factorization is this. I'm going to sample two prime numbers. They're going to have a lot of digits, say each one has around 700 decimal digits, random prime numbers P and Q, and I'm going to multiply them. I'm going to take this product, which I'm going to denote by N, and I'm going to give you P times Q, which I'm denoting by N. And solving integer factorization is simply factoring back N to this more primal information, which is P and Q. I'm giving you P times Q, and I'm needing back P and Q. So two facts about integer factorization is that if we're looking in terms of classical computation, that after years of research into integer factorization and the best algorithms we have for integer factorization, it seems to be computationally hard, which more practically means that if we are taking the best algorithms that we have on the fastest, strongest supercomputers that we have, it's still going to take like hundreds of years to solve one instance of integer factorization. Another fact in the context of quantum is that Shor's algorithm is an algorithm on a quantum computer invented by Peter Shor. And this algorithm tells you that if you have, again, a large-scale, fully functional, error-free quantum computer, it becomes easy. How easy? Theoretically, it can be broken in a matter of hours. So if we're looking on pre-quantum technology, now in the quantum era, the quantum computer can break integer factorization, and it breaks the basis of all of this infrastructure, all of the infrastructure that is pre-quantum. And a lot of things become provably insecure. So it's not that we don't know that they are secure. A lot of it, we know that it's insecure if we have a quantum computer. So this is where we get to the main subject of today's talk, which is post-quantum cryptography. And what is post-quantum cryptography? This is the study of cryptographic algorithms that have two properties. We can run them on common computers, which means they are executable on standard classical computers, and ideally like a person's cell phone. And on the security side, the security holds even against like the strongest of attackers, even if you have a quantum computer. Sounds nice, and before we get a bit into details, let's get a bit of motivation. So why we're talking about it now? Because speaking frankly, we don't even know when we will have a quantum computer. Why should we care today about post-quantum security? So my claim is this. Very simple, very simply put, if we have quantum computers built, say in X amount of years, then in X amount of years, some of the information that we consider private today that is sent over the internet is going to become public in X amount of years. So the proof to this claim is by a very simple thought experiment in cryptography. And it's called an aggregation attack. So again, we consider the internet, communication over the internet, and we have this assumption that everything is secure. And let's look on one, like in a nutshell, the key of this attack that all of this communication can be recorded, saved, and the adversary can wait until there is a quantum computer and then know a lot of it. So let's zoom in on one specific communication. Let's say I have a genomics company. It has a database of DNA information and names. There is an analytics company on the right, and it gives some service of algorithmic analysis. And the genomics company sends the information, the DNA samples, to the analytics company. And a very simple adversary that has a lot of computer memory can do the following. It can simply record the communication between the two companies and save the ciphertext. So even though the information under the encryption is private, the adversary can still read the ciphertext. So can still know that this is an encryption of something, but I don't know what it is. It's going to save it on the side. And you can imagine that slowly but surely this adversary can gather a huge database. All it needs is memory, like simple memory, a lot of memory. A big database of ciphertext, of all kinds of sorts of information, private communication, genomic data, passwords and secret keys, and all it needs to do is wait X amount of years until there is a quantum computer, and then break everything that's pre-quantum secure, like non-secure quantumly. And some of this information, then you can insert X, whatever you believe will happen. X can be forever, X can be 5, X can be 20. Depends on the engineering from quantum computers. And some of this information you don't want out even in 20 years. Say, my DNA is not going to change in 20 years. And many other examples. So post-quantum cryptography seeks to create this infrastructure back from the bottom, and so that everything is quantum secure. We are going to talk a bit about the bottom two layers, just a tiny bit. And we want, like, the bottom layer is hard mathematical problems that are hard also for quantum computers. We saw previously that the previous mathematical problem that we had was broken quantumly. So before I'm defining the problem, I want to define the mathematical object that the problem refers to, which is lattices. So lattices are a very important tool in post-quantum cryptography. They are defined as follows. A lattice is given by n lists of m numbers each, n list, each of length m. You can imagine to get the magnitude of m, the length of each list is 256, and the number of lists is 128, say. And we call this list of lists. You can think about it, if you know a little bit of mathematics, as n vectors. And this is the lattice basis. This is what we call the lattice basis. A bit of geometric intuition behind the lattice basis. This lattice basis describes a periodic set of points in the space Rm. So this is an m-dimensional space. This is an infinite set of points. Let's see an example. If I'm having m equals 2, n equals 2, a lattice could be any periodic set of points in the two-dimensional space R2. A lattice can look like this. It depends on the content of the lattice basis BL. It can also look like this. Again, depends on the content of BL. And know that we can visualize the lattice until m equals 3, because we don't we don't know how to think about pictures that are higher than 3D. Maybe think, but not visualize. Okay, so now to the computational problem. We define the mathematical object. The computational problem, which you should know, this is maybe, not maybe, surely the most important computational problem in post-quantum cryptography today, one of the most computational problems in cryptography as a whole. It's called learning with errors. It was discovered by Oded Regev in 2005, and it's defined as follows. So let BL a random lattice spaces, again with the same parameters, and you should remember that the lattice L, which is induced by this lattice basis, lives in dimension 256. And I'm going to claim that if I sampled this lattice basis BL at random, the two distribution, one in green and two in red, are going to be computationally distinguishable. Any computation any reasonable computation will not be able to tell who's who. The first, I'm going to sample just a random point in the space, R to the 256. This point doesn't care about the lattice. The second one, I'm going to first sample a random point in the lattice. Then I'm going to open a small radius, and I'm going to sample a random point in this small radius, and this is going to be my sample. And this computational problem, again, experts believe, we don't know for sure, is hard also for quantum computers. Let's get a bit of intuition. So this is visualization in m equals 2. I sampled a lattice in m equals 2. And I'm going to claim that this sample, this is just a random sample in the space, is indistinguishable even for quantum computers. Then the following sample, I'm going to sample a random point in the lattice. This is the orange one. Then I'm going to open the small radius. I'm going to sample a random point in the radius. And this is going to be my sample. And the red one is computationally indistinguishable from the green one. Now, this visualization is a little bit misleading because you can say, well, I can just look at the lattice. If the point is close to the lattice, this is 2. If the point is with high probability is going to be back, like far from the lattice, this probably came from sample 1. But a bit of intuition of why it is indeed, we believe it's hard. So the computer doesn't see the lattice. It just gets the basis. It doesn't know how to open it like we drew it on the board here. And the larger m and n, the harder the problem. And in a small nutshell of getting the intuition of why learning with errors is believed to be hard by experts, is that if we sample a random lattice BL for large enough m and n, the orientation with respect to the actual lattice L is going to be computationally hard, even for a quantum computer. So the quantum computer cannot figure out that, well, I'm just near the lattice. It cannot detect that the lattice is close, if it sees only the basis BL. So we talked about the mathematical object that is the basis for most of post-quantum cryptography. We saw the learning with errors problem. And one more thing that we'll have time to look at is a public key encryption based on LWE. LWE is learning with errors. So two facts that are going to support this public key encryption scheme is that the first fact, that if you have the basis BL, you can efficiently sample either from 1 or from 2. Like you can sample a random point in the space, that's from 1, and you can sample a point in the lattice, and then with small random perturbation, you can do it having the basis BL. The second fact is that post-quantum cryptography developed some techniques that you can sample the lattice basis BL together with a secret key, or what we usually call it a lattice trapdoor, which we denote by R. And if you have R, you can in fact distinguish between 1 and 2. You can know that you are near the lattice, only if you have the secret key R. So let's conclude with our public key encryption based on LWE. In public key, I'm going to have a secret key. I'm going to publish the public key. And now we have Alice and we have Bob, and Bob wants to most simply encrypt 1 bit and send it to Alice using the public key. And only Alice should be able to decrypt it. So what we are going to do, we are going to take the public key to be the lattice basis, and we're going to take the secret key to be the lattice trapdoor or the lattice secret key R. And how is Bob going to decrypt? We said earlier that this is indistinguishable from this, and we want encryptions of 0 to be indistinguishable from encryptions of 1. So how we are going to encrypt? If we want to encrypt 0, we are going to sample from 1, because we know that we can sample from 1 having the lattice basis BL. And if we want to encrypt 1, we are going to sample from 2. And nobody can know which one's which means if this was an encryption of 0 or an encryption of 1, based on this information BL. Only Alice can know. So few last comments for the future work of post-quantum cryptography. So we saw in encryption, we saw that we have new mathematical problems, we have new schemes, but there is a huge problem with efficiency generally in post-quantum cryptography. So here, encrypting 1 bit takes us about n times m computation. And also the ciphertext size is huge. It's like 256 numbers. And this is one, like just in a word, a lot of the research that is done currently in post-quantum cryptography. And one more thing that Anna is going to tell you a bit more about is standardization, which means we should know, we should look into perform cryptanalysis and trying to break with the quantum computer, theoretically speaking, more computational problems, having new computational problems to rely on, maybe having efficiency gains this way. And this is an entire field, standardization, and yeah, this concludes this talk.
So thank you, Omri. This is an opportunity for those of us in the audience who managed to keep up with the talk to ask some questions. And it may seem some academic, very far from that. There are lots of companies that show up saying things where we're 5, 10, 15, 20 years ahead of our competition. And how actually do I start encrypting these things today? Because that computer is coming. So please.
What are the basic assumptions about quantum computing capabilities when you assume that it's hard to solve?
Right. So I'm assuming that if I'm thinking about my adversary and I'm estimating the computational power of my adversary, I'm going to assume no restriction. Like, I'm assuming that the adversary of a post-quantum secure scheme has a fully functional, full-scale quantum computer, works just as perfectly as a digital computer today. No restriction of qubits, no restriction of running time, nothing.
Nowadays, there is a that decoded any of kind of encryption in a post.
You mean in practice?
In practice?
Yeah, there are many different kind of schemes. Signature scheme, encryption scheme, even zero-knowledge protocols. There are a lot of implementations. And they have a lot of problems. Most of it is efficiency. Sometimes it even breaks. The more efficient ones. We have candidates, but we didn't find something that is fully efficient and everyone can see it, and this is a good encryption scheme. Only candidates, not a really, in my opinion, not a really good one yet.
Do we follow, does Moore's rule also apply here for quantum computing in terms of the quantum compute?
So Moore's law is actually
incremental power.
I think that right now they don't think about Moore's law. Moore's law is like you're trying to to reduce the size of the chip all of the time. Quantum, you're already in the atomic scale, so things are literally as small as they can be. I think that right now, we don't think that people that engineer quantum computers don't really think about Moore's law in terms of the circling hardware revolving around the qubit. You mean? For some problems, yes. For some specific computational problems, yes. Not indefinitely. Like Moore's law has an end because of physics. When you're getting things too small, you get quantum phenomena that are unwanted. It creates errors in your computer. So Moore's law actually, for people that engineer it, Moore's law does have an end. It's not going to, as far as we understand the physics of engineering computers, it's not going to continue indefinitely. At some point, it's not going to keep going exponentially.
Yeah. And if your question referred to the quantum hardware, recently you could say it does seem to be behaving somewhat exponentially in how it's evolving.
For some, yeah. For some problems, yeah.
So lately, the NIST released two PQC algorithms, the Kyber and the lithium. Is your research aligned to those kind of algorithms?
My research is not really aligned with Kyber. Not like.
Yes, I think we've got time for perhaps two more questions. So, yep, one there and one.
So the best tool that we generally have for things that we can't do physically is theory. So, for example, Shor's algorithm right now exists in theory. We know that once we have a physical computer, it breaks some kind of stuff. And when we do cryptanalysis, when we try to test if new encryption schemes will be quantum secured, unlike integer factorization, we mainly use, we take the best cryptanalysis techniques, which come from theory, and we apply these techniques to these computational problems, and usually we have some kind of answer. Sometimes we don't, but in a nutshell, the answer to your question is theoretical cryptanalysis. This is the best.
And the question, please.
I see. So if I'm understanding what you're saying the amount of information that we'll actually need to protect is very small, and even though this is very inefficient, you might get away with it. I don't really know, to be honest, the full parameters of what you will want to protect, the amount, speaking more precisely, the amount of bits that you want to protect. But if you give a concrete number, we can, I think if it's... I think that at some point it will be possible, not necessarily by this scheme though. It will be better scheme, more efficient, still post-quantum secure, probably, and 2000 bit would be completely reasonable, even more, hopefully.
Thank you. Thank you for your speech. And also thank you for beginning the introduction of Anna, from whom we're about to speak on standardization. But to give her full credit, she is an associate professor at NTNU in Norway. Prior to that, she was a postdoctoral researcher at the ISG group at RHDL. Is a research scientist at AI Research and completed her PhD at Bristol University. So please, Anna.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. So thank you for the introduction. And yes, today I'll be talking about the post-quantum cryptography standardization process. And before I talk about that, so Omri kind of very nicely introduced my, my topic, but I will just add a little bit onto that. So today, most of the widely used public key encryption schemes are based on two hard mathematical problems, and these are factorizations and discrete logarithm. And in 1994, we had an algorithm that was published by Peter Shor, and that given a large enough quantum computer is going to completely break these two hard mathematical problems. So sort of given a large enough quantum computer, all public key encryption that is relying on those two mathematical problems is completely broken. It's also worth mentioning the Grover's algorithm that was published in '96, and that speeds up the so-called unstructured search, and that's going to be a little bit more relevant when we talk about symmetric key cryptography. And it's not going to be as devastating as Shor's algorithm, but we'll talk about a bit more about it later. And so as Omri said, some of the data that's encrypted today with public key encryption might still be sensitive in 20 years' time. Right, so to give you an example, if, for example, you're encrypting a message to plan a friend's surprise party, right? You probably want that message to stay secret for the next couple of weeks, right? After that, it's no longer relevant. However, if we're talking about like healthcare data, or if we're talking about like bank data or government or military data, that's very much something that's gonna still be very sensitive in, 20, 30, 40 years time, okay? And so that's where sort of what Omri was saying about aggregation attacks comes in, right? And it's worth noting that today we are sort of still very far from having a large enough quantum computer that would break these. So we're very far away. Of course, these things are hard to predict, and we do think the day is going to come where we are going to have a large enough quantum computer to do this, right? And so that leads into post-quantum crypto standardization, and in particular, it leads into the question of why post-quantum cryptography and why post-quantum cryptography now. And so that's the first part of the answer to that question. And the second part is sort of a bit more of a realistic, which is it takes a very long time to develop and to deploy these algorithms. Okay, so once, once we, because anyone can come up with a crypto algorithm and say, okay, I think this is great. But realistically, what we do with this is that we have to give the crypto and the security community a very long time to look at these algorithms, to try and attack them, to apply cryptanalysis, and so to build up confidence in these algorithms that we're proposing. And that's where the standardization comes in. And in fact, throughout the standardization process, we had actually a lot of schemes that were broken. So the process is really working, fully as intended. And then, of course, once we have these primitives, then we have to start deploying them, and completely changing the public key infrastructure system is going to take a very long time. So that's where we start now. And so I'm going to be talking about the National Institute of Standard and Technology, NIST standardization process, which is a body of standards in the US. And in April 2016, they published a report saying that a large enough quantum computer that could break these problems may arrive as soon as 2030. As I said, we don't know this for sure. It's hard to predict, but this is sort of the report that they published. And then following this report, in December of 2016, they launched the call for post-quantum cryptographic algorithms. And I'm going to tell you what they are. But before I do that, I can tell you a little bit about the process. So this process lasted for roughly 5 years. So it went from 2017 to 2022. There were 4 rounds, and I've put 4 with an asterisk because there were 3 rounds after which some finalists were announced. So selected for standardization, but there were a few more candidates that they decided to take for a 4th round. There were 82 initial submissions, of which 69 were deemed complete. And the outcome of this has been that 4 were selected for standardization, 3 of which are based on lattices that Omri talked about, and I will talk about a little bit more, and 1 is hash-based. If you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. So before I tell you what the call specifically for what a cryptographic algorithm was, I need to tell you about symmetric key encryption. Symmetric key encryption is one of two types of encryption that we have in cryptography, where we have one key that we use for both encryption and decryption. Okay, so we have like encrypt, get a ciphertext, decrypt, get the clear text back with the same key. Now, the algorithms that we have now for symmetric key encryption are typically very fast, very efficient, less vulnerable to quantum attacks. So if you remember Grover's algorithm that I mentioned, what we need to sort of mitigate the attack that comes from Grover's algorithm in the current symmetric key crypto is to adjust the parameters, right? So it's not like public key encryption. It doesn't break it completely, okay? So now I told you this, and you might think, okay, well, why do we even need to bother with anything else? And the answer to that is key exchange. Because we're using the same key for both encryption and decryption, we have to somehow agree on a key, right? And we're assuming that we're communicating over an insecure channel. So what do we do? And the answer to that is public key encryption, and that was the first part of NIST standardization call. And in public key encryption, what we have now is that we have a public key that is generated from a secret key. And what we do now is that the public key can be published, and it's hard, we assume it's hard to recover the secret key from knowledge of the public key. And we encrypt with a public key that everyone has access to, and we can only decrypt with the secret key. And so then there's no need for transmitting a key, right? Because only the person who holds the key can decrypt, and they don't need to share it with anyone else. However, the drawbacks are they are less efficient. So when I say this, I typically mean larger ciphertext size and larger keys. And of course, they are vulnerable to quantum attacks. And that's where the NIST call comes in. And the second type of cryptographic algorithms that NIST called for was digital signatures. If you don't really know what they are, you can sort of really think about digital signatures as like the digital analog of a physical signature. So what this allows us to do is to ensure the integrity of a message as well as to authenticate the origin of a message. And the way this works is that we have a message, we use what is called a hash function. If you don't know what that is, you don't need to worry about it. Essentially, what you need to understand from this is that it kind of compresses the message, and that's in order to have fast and efficient signatures. And then we sign with a private key, and we verify with a public key, okay? And so the NIST call was for digital signatures and public key encryption. Okay. And of course, I don't have time to really take you through the constructions, but what I can do is just give you a little bit of the mathematical flavor that is behind these constructions. So Omri mentioned lattices, which are just sort of order points in space. Here I have a lattice in 2 dimensions. And what a lot of, and I'm going to be talking about learning with errors as well, as Omri did, but maybe a nice intuition for why learning with errors is hard is that it reduces to this so-called shortest vector problem, which is essentially to find a short vector in a lattice. And of course, in 2 dimensions, this is easy, but if you make your parameters large enough and if you have like a really wonky basis, this is not going to be easy at all. And the learning with errors problem looks like this algebraically. So I think it's nice because Omri showed you what it looks like geometrically, and here I'm showing you like an actual equation. So the green parameters are public, the red parameters are secret, and we have a matrix A. If you don't know what a matrix is, you don't need to worry about that. We have a secret S, and we have a small error E. The secret is also small. And we form this element B, which is public, by multiplying A by S and by adding this small error, okay? And so already from here, you can start seeing how it looks like cryptography a little bit more, right? Because I've showed you a set of points in space, and you might think, okay, what is this? How do I build cryptography? Now I have a secret on a slide, okay? And so again, I don't have a ton of time to go through this, but this is what one of the finalists looks like. So this is what public key encryption looks like in one of the finalists, Kyber. And the key generation is exactly this. Okay, so we form this equation where the public key is going to be the pair of elements A and B, and the secret key is going to be the element S. Okay, that's the public key. And then to do encryption, we sample some more errors, which you don't really need to worry about. But the important thing here is that does the mouse look? Yeah, okay. So we have this A, which is public, and then we have the element B is hidden in here, and then we simply just add the message. okay? And that's how we encrypt. So going back here, we have AS plus E, we just add the message, and that's your encryption, okay? Simplifying some things, but that's how it works. So that's kind of all I wanted to say today, and I will conclude by saying that additionally to the post-quantum crypto call, NIST has also launched a call for signatures specifically this time. And the first deadline was on the 1st of June, so that was the deadline for the first round. And, you know, if you're interested in this, I kind of encourage you to follow this. I think it'll be similarly to, you know, the full PQC call. It was very exciting. Again, a lot of constructions were broken. You know, it really promoted research. So you should follow this as it happens. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Anna. And if we have any questions from the audience about standardization or related issues, the floor is yours.
The NIST algorithms, the four that were chosen, were they proven to be quantum safe, or it is not that they're not broken until now?
So it's kind of hard to do this, right? Because we don't really know, much like the quantum computer, we don't really know when an attack is going to come. You know, these are things that are very hard to predict. And the idea of the standardization call is really, like I said, to kind of make everything public and give the community a chance, you know, a real chance to try and break these algorithms. And as I mentioned, a lot of these were actually broken during the process, you know, and it is in fact one of the principles of cryptography that's called the Kirchhoff principle, that the security of your cryptographic system should only rely on the secret key. Everything else should be public. So you should really give the community the chance to try and break these algorithms. Now, like Omri said, the learning with errors problem was proposed in 2005. It's not been broken yet, so that's, you know, nearly 20 years. So we have at this point, like, we're pretty confident that it holds up against attacks, but that's not something that we're ever going to be able to tell with 100% certainty.
Hi. Thank you for the presentation. I have a basic question just to understand. You mentioned the cryptography. Is it different from cryptography?
Yes, so Omri touched on that a little bit as well. So post-quantum cryptography is classical, you know, it's sort of classical cryptography that's not breakable by a quantum computer. So it should be implementable on a classic computer because, again, we kind of want to start deploying it now. And quantum cryptography is really based on quantum phenomena.
Wonderful. So thank you. A round of applause for Anna. Thank you very much. So we're now moving on to hear a talk about a view from the front seat, how quantum is shaping cybersecurity from Matthew and from Duncan, who I shall be introducing as they make their way to the stage. So Matthew is the Vice President of Honeywell Corporation and Chief Product Security Officer, responsible for leading the product cybersecurity and product privacy programs for the company. And Jones is the head of cybersecurity for Continuum, one of the leading quantum computing companies. And over to you, gentlemen.
Great. Thanks. Thank you all for inviting us. So you're going to probably hear the moving of microphones as we talk. So what we wanted to introduce everyone to is just a kind of discussion from our perspective of being in the front seat. So you've had a really great set of conversations about encryption and you know academic discussions about how this works and how these all are being thought about and sort of being brought together. And we thought it might give you a little different perspective from the standpoint of Continuum, which is partially, largely owned by Honeywell. We actually make quantum computers, right? And so we've incorporated that technology into our products and services, and we'll talk a bit about that in a few minutes. But you know, the idea we want to start off with is, you know, again, yes, quantum computing to the perspective of breaking RSA, yes, that's still a ways off. But the computers exist today, today. Right? There's actually one that's not too far from where I sit. And in terms of this curve that you're seeing on your screen, right, that's your typical, the black line is sort of the binary computer world that we are all familiar with, right? So everything, so go back in time and you think about, early, computer days and how that sort of evolved, and some of you may not have been alive at that time. Some of us were just barely alive. Point is that you are now at that same place with quantum computing, right? It is truly, you're on the doorstep of a whole new way of computing that's, again, literally reshaping how we think, how we will do math, how we will approach problems. And that's a really, really kind of cool place to be. And the blue line is really talking about the evolution of quantum computing, right? So today, and just a simple way to explain this is, today, or I should say just a few years ago, you could simulate a quantum computer on your laptop. And you still get a small simulation going, and that works relatively well. And that was probably equivalent to what quantum computing was just a few years ago. But as you can sort of see, you are here, right? We're just moments away from, and I say really moments, away from being at a point where you no longer can simulate what a current quantum computer can do, except on a supercomputer, right? So that's a big shift. And as you can sort of see in the timeline, very quickly, we're going to be at a point where the capacity, the speed, the performance, you were making a comment earlier about, the speed and the performance of those computers are going to outstrip what is possible to emulate. At that point, we're in a whole new area of what capacity, capability, and frankly, the technology. Now, as you can think about quantum computing, it's a lot like when computers first came out, right? So ENIAC, and some of you, I'm sure, remember that in your coursework, right? It was one thing. It was as big as a room, and it required, a lot of attention and patience, and this idea of networking, finding more than one was quite an extreme thought. But now we think about it, you have the same capacity, or well more than that capacity on our watch. And our whole world is digitally connected and communicating all the time, real time. There's, I'm sure, thousands of phones in here right now connecting to any number of different services. Well, that's the evolution of quantum computing is going to, right? We're going to move from this idea of one and trying to solve really tough problems to many. That's going to require different networks, different topologies, different ways of thinking, fundamentally. And as we move, as you've heard from Omri and others, there's a point, X, where RSA will be broken. Right? It's pretty much a given. Now, we don't know exactly what that date is, but when that happens, all bets are off. You better have a different algorithm in place, and you better have a different way of controlling your information. Because without that, everything is open, right? Essentially, you'll be, anybody who wants to get that and has the right computing capability, that's what's possible. The challenge, though, as we think about this is how do you get in front of that, right? So we're all sitting on this edge saying, all right, I'm ready. What do we do? How do we do it? And a lot of this discussion so far is about, I'm going to break RSA. I want to get down and work on the algorithm. Well, yeah. Tough question. It's tough math. Very tough math. But I've been doing cybersecurity for a better part of I don't even want to say that, 25, a long, long time, maybe longer than some of you have been alive. And, there's another way to break, good encryption, right? There's two parts to it. One is the algorithm, which is really tough. The other side of it is the entropy that went into the algorithm to give you the key. And that's really where the game changes for us. Now, I've only put a few examples, but there are many, many examples of what happens when you have bad entropy. Entropy is the randomness, the random strings of data that you use along with the algorithm to create your key. Guess what? If I can figure out how you generated that key, or how you generated your randomness, doesn't matter what key you used or what algorithm you used, I'll get to your key. And as you can see, this isn't just hype, folks. This is real data. You go out, IEEE and NSA and, NIST, sorry, not NSA, NIST published some documents on this just in the last few years, right? 1 in 172 RSA keys are breakable because of entropy, poor choice of entropy. So think about how many keys that are out there. 1 in 172. That's enormous amount of keys that are breakable, all because of the choices made around the entropy that those keys went into. That's part of the challenge where you can start using that technology that we were talking about to create better. When I say better, that's one of the benefits of what quantum computing brings to us, is this ability to have truly unpredictable keys, right? Truly unpredictable randomness, which then goes into that keying mechanism that then produces really fantastic keys. And let's be honest, if you can improve the quality of the security of your products and services, why wouldn't you, right? And so as some of the other individuals spoke about, you know, the idea of being able to bridge that gap takes steps, right? So we're not going to all be on this post-quantum planet for some time, right? We're not there yet, but there's lots of steps between now and then, and things like this are exactly the sorts of things you need to be thinking about, which is how do you improve the keys that you make today? Well, you increase the quality of the entropy, of the randomness of those keys, and now you create products and systems and keys that are better than what's commercially available through typical TRNGs. So with that, I'm going to bring my friend in, Duncan, to actually explain some of this a little bit better and deep dive you into what we've done.
Hi, everyone. So I promised to keep this quite high level, but my goal is to leave you feeling warm and fuzzy about the potential of quantum to strengthen cybersecurity. So if we dive a little bit more into what Matt's been saying here. So all keys, all cryptographic keys that we create, and it doesn't matter whether it's the kind of post-quantum stuff that Omri's working on, or whether it's the stuff we use today, they exist somewhere on this spectrum, and it's down to effectively how unpredictable your key is. So we all want keys to be at the top of this graph. We want our keys to be fully unpredictable, and obviously we want to avoid them being fully predictable. The challenge we have, though, is that with the tools that we have available today and with the classical technology that we predominantly rely upon, we can't actually prove how strong the keys we are using really are. Now, to make this hopefully a little bit clearer, I like to use very simple analogies because my brain's quite simple, so it works for me. Is there anybody from Italy in the room? Okay, so we're going into your home ground here because I want to talk a little bit about Parmesan cheese, okay? So imagine I come to you in the street. Well, actually, let's imagine you're like a cheese scientist, whatever those things are. Imagine I give you a lump of cheese and I say, is this Parmesan? And you kind of smell it and it's crumbly and you taste it, it tastes good. But can you actually demonstrate that that is Parmesan cheese or not? The thing about Parmesan cheese is a little while ago, some people in Italy rightly said, you can't make Parmesan cheese in New Jersey. Like, half the point of Parmesan cheese is it's made the traditional way and it's made in Italy. And not just Italy, it's made in this particular piece of Italy. So if you want to understand whether you're really holding a piece of Parmesan cheese, you've got to go back and understand where it came from. So you can't just test it and figure it out. You've got to go back and understand its provenance, its roots. And we can't do this. Like, the equivalent if you weren't following the analogy, the equivalent is if I give you a key and I say to you, can you demonstrate this is a good key or not? You can't, because to understand if it's a good key, you've got to understand if it's unpredictable. And to understand if something's unpredictable, you've got to go look at how did you produce that unpredictable data. And this is what we can do now with quantum technology. So instead of being somewhere in this fuzzy middle ground, we can demonstrate very concretely that we're generating keys that are at the top of this spectrum. And we can put numbers on it as well. So it's not just that we're saying, trust us, this stuff is slightly more unpredictable. We can put a firm mathematical proof around how difficult it would be to guess what these keys are. And this is all possible because of how quantum physics works in general. So quantum is something that, at its absolute heart, is unpredictable. So you've probably all watched Big Bang Theory, and you've seen the kind of Schrodinger's cat examples. That is kind of hinting at what we're talking about here. It's the idea that you can create a quantum experiment, and you can measure it, and you can genuinely not know what you're going to get out of it. So let's come back to this number for a second. I just want to give you a sense of what we're talking about here, because when I say that we're becoming more certain about these things, we're becoming a lot more certain about these things. So unless you are some kind of scientist, and I guess maybe some of you are, 2 to the minus 128 probably doesn't mean very much. But this is what it looks like when you write it out. So this is now the likelihood you would have of predicting anything about the keys that are generated through this kind of quantum technique. And to put this number into another friendly analogy, imagine you took a very large bag and you filled it with all the grains of sand in the world, beaches, oceans, the whole lot. You reached in, you grabbed out your favorite grain, you wrote a number, your name on it, threw it back into the bag, rummaged it around, I give it to Matt, he pulls out one at random, and he picks the same grain of sand. That would be more likely than being able to break into these sorts of things. So we've been working alongside Honeywell. So Quantinuum and Honeywell have been working on embedding this kind of technology into real-world systems, because this all sounds like science fiction, but actually it is not. So this is something that we now have running in production. So if you look at the left-hand side of this diagram, so this represents how we've integrated this technology into Honeywell's central public key infrastructure. So that's the bit that kind of certifies new devices, whether they're smart meters, building management systems, you name it. And we spent a long time, more than a year, figuring out how to bring this quantum technology into the systems Honeywell was already using in a way that didn't compromise all of their lovely certifications and allowed us to demonstrate sort of the value that we were bringing. So that was one half of the equation, and that's in production now. The second half is the right-hand side of this diagram. So we want to be able to take the devices that are being produced and help them generate stronger keys. And so we've been able to embed some of the output from our quantum computers into each and every device, and allows them to generate stronger keys while they're in the field. So Matt, I don't know if you want to add anything from your side.
Yeah, so to his point, it's a journey. It took us some time, and the benefit is, out of our journey makes, as other companies and other people come after us, you'll be able to actually get this faster, better, and easier, right? This is the kind of technology that we see is really another bridge to what that future is by increasing that quality of entropy, creates more resilient keys, and we've spent an enormous amount of effort to make sure that all of our back-end systems are still as secure as they were before, better, and using this, we now can deploy this into our products and for our customers' benefit. Again, all making the world a little bit more secure, a little bit safer. This to his point. At some point, somebody's going to be able to break those keys, right? So I'm still using RSA. I'm just using better entropy. But I'm gonna not be the first guy in the list, right? Because the better the entropy, it still makes that key much harder than the bazillion other keys that are out there. And that's, again, goes back to my comment. If you could make the world a little bit safer, a little bit more secure, why wouldn't you? right? And that's kind of our mindset. So just jump into our last page. You know, the future's coming, right? And you're hearing it today. And so I guess the thought you should take away from this is, you know, it's a journey. We're all on this journey together. And you've got to sort of figure out how you're going to, you know, navigate that for yourselves, whether you're a company, an individual, or a corporation, right? Or a government. And quantum is definitely going to be a fundamental player in the future of encryption and security. And the way we think about it is, again, taking advantage of those capabilities now in our products, our systems, and for our own selves is one of the easiest ways that we can take advantage and improve that security for not just ourselves, but our customers. And again, as things develop, you're already in the front seat. And that's kind of our perspective, is we're on the front seat of how this is going to turn out. And why wouldn't you? Right? Why wouldn't you make the world a little bit safer, a little bit more secure?
I have nothing to add. That is it.
Thank you very much, Duncan and Matt. I would encourage the audience to come up with some questions, because we do have a unique combination here of, you know, a large corporate that is actually implementing these things, a manufacturer of actual quantum hardware, and I think also in Duncan's case, somebody who's come from a background of traditional cybersecurity and computer science and has been transitioning into the quantum aspect. And of course, bonus for anybody that can use cheese metaphors, but that's optional.
So what I would tell you is that the typical way of dealing with that algorithm discussion is really through the standards bodies, because to Omri's point and to others, and especially about standardization, that's why organizations like NIST exist, right? Is their job is to take something and put it out in the public and say, okay, this is the algorithm, attack it. Everybody, schools, everyone. Because that's the only way, truly, that we're going to find out whether an algorithm survives. Now, if it survives that, I don't need to do any testing. I just accept it. Right? That's the beauty of these standards bodies. That's why you have like things like FIPS 148-2. Those are standards and things that comply and can be certified to that level of quality. And so typically that's, and I should add, NIST as well as many other of these large global standards communities already have test beds. And trust me, you have to go through a very rigorous set of tests even to be, you know, deemed worthy. I think some of the comments were made about, you know, here's 69 that were first tested to be provable and, you know, actually completed the test. But relatively quickly, many of them got broken. Why? Because people like you know, went out and said, oh, I will just check that. Let me validate that. And sure enough, well, no, not quite. But that's how we do this. And it's really people power, right, that drive that. And that's typically how these sorts of algorithms find, you know, certification. Does that make sense?
Where do you see the most quantum innovation coming out geographically or groups? Do you feel like there's any group in particular that's really at the forefront of this? Where do you kind of geographically put innovation, quantum innovation?
So I tell you what we're worried about, and we're worried about what China is doing in quantum. Because when you look globally at the investment in the declared investment in quantum technologies, China is leading the way by quite some degree. But let's park them as to one side. So I think in general, Europe and the US are really throwing a lot of cash into this equation. So the leading Western computing companies are kind of spattered across across Europe and in the US. And I think it's a lot of the major players that you would be familiar with. So IBM has been in the game for quite a long time. Google's playing with it. Microsoft is playing with it. Honeywell was playing with it before they span us out as a separate company. So the innovation is happening. I don't think in any unexpected places, but the one that should be keeping us all up at night, is what's going to emerge from China, and that's they don't always reveal everything they're doing, I don't think.
Yes, go ahead.
Shout, yeah.
If you feel like shouting, you're welcome. Otherwise,
yeah, can you hear me? Okay. Matt, you mentioned the intersection point of the two graphs, and in which point in the next coming years, quantum computing will be unpredictable and develop even exponentially than we know today. So my question is, so we know decryption will be much easier to do. Will encryption be easier as well?
I think I think Omri and others made really good arguments. Some math questions will be easier, some not so easy. The way I think you have to think about quantum computing in general is you think about binary. Binary is just 1 and 0, right? So it's easy for you to just go, oh, well, it's either on or off, right? Yes, no. Quantum, in the most simplest way, I try to explain it to like my 18-year-old daughter, is it's on and off plus your rotations, right? Up and down. So it's got a physicality that no other aspect, right? And if you put it in a sort of really simple, it creates a whole new way of thinking about lattices, a whole new way of thinking about math and how you can take Cartesian products and sort of move them together and do incredible math that you simply don't have the memory or the capacity to do today. And that's really what changes the game. I don't necessarily think that encryption or decryption are going to be faster. I think they will just be as fast as they need to be, because that's really a function of performance. Ultimately, when I think like RSA and Diffie-Hellman, it was a combination of it's unbreakable and, oh, by the way, it's really fast.
thank you. So now, having just heard about the quantum computer manufacturers and also some insight into corporate and enterprise adoption, kick off by talking about the importance of government involvement. And we also just heard from Duncan as well that some are perhaps more disturbing than others. I did want to comment on your question earlier. You're from Canada. Canada's doing a great job as well and has a fantastic ecosystem, which is actually punching well above its weight. So we're about to hear from Yuval Sinai, who is the head of Active Cyber Defense Department of the Israeli National Security. He is an expert in national security, homeland security, research, advanced security technologies. And we're going to be hearing from him about the security by design and security by default to go beyond quantum threats. Thank you, Yuval.
Okay. Hello, good afternoon to you. My name is Yuval. Thank you for joining this session. I'd like to start with a question. How many of you using quantum computer on a regular basis? Okay. How many of you install patches on quantum computer on a regular basis? Okay. So the idea behind this session is to elaborate is what is security by design principle, what is security by default, what is important, and what is the recommended stage to start to secure the quantum computer itself, because it will be, from my perspective, the next attack surface for attackers. So we're going to get a short intro, but I think the lecture before me covered a lot of things, useful things, so we can move forward. I will provide a highlight about typical quantum computer, what we have now, what we have in future, maybe we're in the future, we don't know in practice. Threat landscape, cyber landscape, of course, and secure by design principle, secure by default principle, and passive threat modeling that can use to design or to understand what is the threat landscape and what control do you need to deploy to secure the environment. First of all, I'd like to provide thank for the community list that they provide feedback for this presentation. So thanks to them. So as you know, quantum computer is something that moving forward, and the industry is understood that it can provide a cutting-edge technology and also a business value. Because if you don't obtain a business value, nobody goes to invest in practice. So the investment is increasing, the customer use it. We see a lot of developers integrated simulation of quantum computer, and also moving to SaaS solution or quantum as a service, and try to use it and deploy a new solution to resolve business cases. So if you talk about quantum computer itself, currently we're in the age of the noisy computer. So the main issue with the quantum computer, from my perspective, is the noise ratio and how you can resolve the error weight. Because if you try to compare regular computer to quantum computer, we don't have an optimization way to reduce the noise, and this damage our ability to achieve the business goals. So if you take the most optimistic one, is the fault tolerance of quantum computing. It should resolve it by using logical method, etc. But currently, we reside in the left side in the noisy computer. But in practice, quantum computer itself is a combination of analog mechanism and digital mechanism. The digital mechanism, most of them is traditional software, API, etc., that can connect to the analog realm. And the control itself of the quantum computer usually is the digital one. So what we don't know about the digital or the threat landscape today? Okay, we don't, something that's very important, we don't understand, from our perspective, what is the threat landscape itself, what is the effect, how do we need to tolerate this issue or resolve it. But we know something like this, that there are lots of technology, lots of applications of a quantum computer that can lead us to solution or the challenges that we need to resolve. So there are not some magic solution that we can take one security control and force it in one quantum computer, because each quantum computer itself, the processing itself, the technology behind it, has a uniqueness. For example, superconducting requiring cooling. The cooling creates a challenge in the environment cycles. 3 atoms create another one. So we need to understand what is the technology, what is the impact itself on the threat landscape. So if we go to the most common use case that the environment of the quantum computer, usually nobody go and install a quantum computer in his house. Usually we have the end user, we have cloud service provider, usually the big one that provides quantum as a service, and we have the quantum computer in itself. Some of the quantum computer even not sit or reside in the data center of the cloud service provider. Some of them is in the remote location. So if we try to figure out what is the threat landscape, don't have the time to cover all this scenario, but some of them very traditional one, like common application security. Some of them hybrid because it is connected to the quantum computing world, and some of them is very new, more theoretical, like the last one, quantum element with unauthorized qubits. So we figure out why the internal research, that in theory, some qubits can get correlation between each other, can get entanglement, and if many customers use it without a good solution and then move it to the classic mode, some data leakage may occur. If it's practical, we don't know. It is a very theoretical one, of course. Another use case is very common in the internet. The end user use software or platform that provided you simulation. And also, we see that there's some roadmap to introduce a marketplace. So if you can purchase a digital gate and then download and install it to the quantum computer, and this can create also a cyber threat or can lead to cyber threat, like common application hacking or abusing. And if you talk about hybrid, quantum secret code manipulation, someone can redesign our quantum gate, and then we install on the real quantum computer the gate itself, but it does not work as expected. And we also see that lots of quantum computing project in practice is open source issue, because many of them is open in the wild, and the using of open source also is part of the code's solution itself. So it creates another challenge, how to resolve it, how to protect the library itself. And of course, like Omri said, and Anya said, that quantum computer itself can also attack quantum computer. You can use it in practice. You can break the asymmetric, the symmetric keys, etc., that we use to protect our data. So what is the solution? The idea is when we design a new product or a new service, we need to understand what is the threat landscape, what is the misuse can be used, and designed from scratch to be secure. Because after it will be very hard to resolve it and fix it. And also we need to deploy the principle, deploy secure by default. The idea behind this is very simple. If we move the task to secure the system to the end customer, it will be very hard to them to secure the solution itself, very costly. If by out of the box, the solution will be secure, we reduce the time and the effort for the customer side, and improve the resistance against cyber threats. And how to begin in practice? So, there are lots of methodology how to create a threat landscape. One of them also, there's some research that they cover how to secure quantum computer. And the idea about it is create understanding what is the business goals, what is the scope of the solution itself, or the quantum computer, what is the dependency between the parts, the application, etc. Create a mapping of a threat that we need to realize it and optimize the solution. We can use STRIDE, it's common context summary to describe threats. And then we understand the vulnerability, create attack maps, some diagrams how the attacker can use it. And then we design the security control and move to production to deploy the security in practice. So, I'd like to close it with a short summary. So, in practice, quantum computer become more accessible, more valuable to customer, also to organization, and we figure out that in the future, like any attack sector, they may be exposed to new cyber threats and advisory. The nature of the threat landscape to quantum computing can be changed in the future, and we don't have all the information how to protect it, but we need to plan ahead how to resolve it. And it's very, very important to embrace secure by design, secure by default principle. Thank you.
Ivan, and you know what to do. It's over to the audience with questions relating to national security. I did want to say for those that are making their way out, we're just about to have a coffee break. We did hear about Parmesan and pasta. Normally the pasta comes before the Parmesan. The coffee always comes after, so that's coming right next. I think in the interest of coffee, could I just make sure that everybody is back at 17:40? So we want to be congregating here in 20 minutes. Meanwhile, get entangled.
Hello. Can you please explain, like in a simple explanation, what is the security by design and security by default?
Okay. Security by design, it's something very simple. Before you go into production or to create a new product or service, think what is your business goals, what is the threat landscape that related to your product or the service, and then implement the controls inside the solution. And security by default, the idea behind it is something very simple. Think about it, you purchase a new router and connect it to the internet. If you need to configure the firewall rules, etc., it's very hard to regular person to deploy it. It's very costly. But if the manufacturer design...
Again, sorry?
But if the manufacturer itself understood what is the threat landscape and implement the security controls by default, like blocking the traffic from outside that cannot get into the network, you get protection, and you also get good security or basic security and tolerance between the cost-effective solution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're about to step into the world of networking and communications, as we promised earlier today. And we're going to be hearing from Ido, the Director of Product and Technology at AT&T, and talking about the telco's path to the quantum era. By background, Ido is the Director of Product and Technology at the R&D Center of AT&T's here in Israel, engaged in innovation and inception of products and solutions in areas such as cloud, analytics, and AI. Prior to working at AT&T, he was CTO of Network Research at Huawei, VP of R&D at ECI Telecom, and...
Thank you. The quantum laws. But good to start. So what I'm going to survey here is to talk about the perspective of a telco such as AT&T in this quantum world. To be honest, quantum computing for a telco, it starts as a real headache. Okay, it's not an easy task to upgrade almost the entire network to support it. So who's to blame for that? We could put it on the godfathers of quantum physics, starting on Richard Feynman, who actually incepted the concept of a quantum computer. But I guess us as AT&T, we also share part of the blame. Peter Shor, Lev Grover, both were actually working at AT&T Bell Labs in New Jersey when they incepted the famous algorithms. So AT&T, for those who are not familiar, it's a 147 years old company. It was founded actually by Alexander Graham Bell, and it's the major US carrier, telco carrier, with more than 100 million subscribers, 5G networks, fiber, and a very long heritage of innovation, 8 Nobel Prizes from Bell Labs, 3 Turing Awards, 11,000 patents. I'm sure not many companies can be proud of such achievements. As a US company and a company that works very closely with the US government, we follow closely what the directives of the government. So the US government, what they're saying actually, it started about 5 years ago with the National Quantum Initiative Act by the US Congress, and that's actually the first public law which also allocated funding, $1.2 billion for 5 years, to upgrade and start preparing to the post-quantum era. 2 years later, actually just last year, 2022, the National Security Memorandum, which was signed by President Biden, and it starts giving clear directives to the national agencies, the security agencies, intelligence community, and Department of Defense to start upgrading to PQC, and actually throughout 2023, this process is going to start. And a few months later, with the National Cybersecurity Strategy, there's increased investment and focus, and actually they encourage, okay, and that's a quote, the private sector to be prepared to the post-quantum future, and we believe it will be enforced to do so, certainly for those who are working with a defense company or with the US government in the coming few years. Which areas do us as AT&T, as a telco, need to focus on? We have the quantum communications, such as QKD, quantum key distribution, but it's not just that. Of course, PQC, that we're talking about. Quantum application, I think we're still in the early stages of that. So far, I've seen many use cases for the use in drug production and analysis of molecules, but certainly the telco also can leverage that, and a lot of work in standardization, which really is a complex, important area, but I'll not cover that here. So what's our way to achieve going into this quantum era? First, we need to create quantum awareness throughout the companies. People who are building networks must be aware of that and understand the risks involved in quantum computing. We need to create inventory to understand, because a company such as AT&T, you need to understand, has thousands of applications, millions of, tens of millions of end nodes, IoT devices, connections to the network. We need to get an inventory of all that, and we need to be able to understand where is the risk. Okay. Of course, talking to customers, starting from the government, but also many other industries, getting talent, especially to build applications. It's not just any software programmer can build a quantum application, and we are looking for partnerships, right? Because it's not technologies. We did develop many of the technologies ourselves in the past, but no more, and certainly not in the quantum space. The good news is, if we are looking for partnerships, is that the global investment are solid in this space. It doesn't have the turbulence, the ups and downs of other sectors. I think it was mentioned previously before, you're looking at 2022 investments. China is leading, about half the investment is coming from China. Israel also, by the way, here is quite impressive, $400 million comparing to about 1.2 billion by the US, okay? Certainly much exceeding any size or GDP. And here in Israel, we have a very vibrant ecosystem from the defense sector, from the government, from the academy, and about 30 startups active in this field. But the Western companies such as the US, Canada, Germany, Britain, and France also start to increase their investment. And I'm quoting here Global Data, which is a research firm saying that the quantum winter is unlikely, and they're looking at a rosy outlook for this field, and main focus on quantum computing investment and quantum communication. The way they explain that is that the investment in this field is long-term investment. People don't expect, the investors don't expect a fast ROI on their investment. And the second, maybe the most important thing, is that a lot of money is coming from the government. And these are strategic initiatives. And the fact that China is so active here is certainly a driver. This is the only equation that I'm going to have on this lecture. So why should we worry? Okay, and I can show it's a very simple equation. So a few years ago, Michele Mosca, I think he's Canadian, he built the Mosca inequality and said, when do you need to worry about? So you take the shelf life of the data, meaning how long does the data have value? right? If it's kind of Facebook, nobody cares, but if it's finance information, healthcare, certainly national defense information, then probably it has value for a few years. So that's the X factor. Y is the time to get the next generation standard, meaning the PQC standard ready, but also installed. And again, I remind you, companies such as AT&T, thousands of applications, some on the data center, some in the cloud, upgrading it all, it's a complex issue, not easy. And Z is the time until PQC is, cryptographic relevant quantum computers are ready. And that's a big question. How long does it take? Because we heard here 2030, also heard 2 years from now. The way to work on that is to identify the threat, to build the inventory, to estimate the risk, secure the asset, and build organization roadmap to solve it. I think I don't have much time, so I'll probably, okay, just this one. Again, to understand the telco touch points, there are quite many. The connection to SD-WAN, run to core connection, IoT and CPE devices. All these that I'm putting here, most rely on Diffie-Hellman or RSA. All these are susceptible to quantum attacks. To work in this area, because PQC algorithms constantly emerge, and so do the methods to break them, we need to get hands-on experience, and we need to evaluate their impact on performance, the scale and the throughput. So we saw in the first lecture, I believe Omri showed what is the impact of how complex it is, but what we have built is a test lab to test these quantum algorithms, and I'll show a short video of that, of how it works. So we are choosing the algorithms. Okay, I did not show the entities, but we are running several connections across different areas in the cloud. Okay, we've chosen the algorithm a few times, and then we estimate what is the impact in performance, both for the server and the client, on throughput, the load, right, and all that. Okay, so very interesting. By the way, we found a factor of about 30 comparing to RSA. That's what we found so far. Few areas of interest, certainly starting from the government and defense, but also the finance, the banking, healthcare, critical infrastructure. These are the areas of interest for QKD. I'll skip that one. But you need to understand, when you build a quantum communication link, an operator needs to have a practical solution, not something academic. It needs to coexist with the current infrastructure to be reliable, to be cost-effective, meaning how long will it take to traverse the entire US. You need to have a real-life environment in terms of space, power, temperature range, being NEPS compliant, different deployment, fabric deployment, FCAPs, and management, meaning default, configuration, codability, performance, security, and interoperability. Again, to build a quantum safe communication network, okay, in the scale of a company such as AT&T, that's a huge task. And I must say that QKD, quantum key distribution, is not the only technology available. Just here in Israel, an Israeli startup that I came across, CyberReach, they are building optical encryption. Again, QKD, quantum key distribution, is encrypting the password exchange itself. That one is encrypting by optical means the entire data, and they claim that even if you record it, a quantum computer could not decipher that. So certainly a very vibrant area, many technologies that we need to navigate through. But where is the opportunity? It does have an opportunity, and I've put here, outlined here, several areas of quantum applications that are of interest. I'll focus on maybe the last one, which is the technician dispatch. You need to understand, again, a company such as AT&T has 40,000 technicians that need to travel across the US. Different use cases, meaning a home, fixing antennas, working at business, many constraints. Everything happens during the day, so it's kind of a traveling salesman problem on steroids. A quantum computer, it's a complex problem, okay? It's very hard to achieve optimal results. certainly in a reasonable time. A quantum computer has the potential to solve this problem, and this is just one example for quantum computer could take an effect. And I'm quoting here BCG, a research firm, which I've just heard a lecture of them, and they're saying that disproportionate share of value created will go to the early adopters. We certainly aim to be such early adopters. So to summarize my talk, I think for us, the telco, a quantum challenge should be addressed now. Different domains that we need to explore, and we need to adapt a very practical, a very agile mindset. So thank you all.
So regrettably, we are running a little bit behind time. So what we're going to have to do is I'll encourage anybody who has questions, please approach the speaker at the end of the session so that we can all get out roughly in time, because I know many people have prior occasions to attend afterwards. So we're going to be we'll be hearing from Hila, and by way of introduction and background, please take your spot. Hila is the managing director of BT Security, with 25 years of experience in the security world, and is focused on protecting IT infrastructure and business assets through digital transformation initiatives, and is active in many technical fields and is a co-founding leader of Cyber Ladies, a global movement that advocates for women in cybersecurity.
Yeah.
Please.
Thank you. And thank you for staying that long. We're almost done. A few words about myself. As you've heard, more than 25 years of experience in the cybersecurity field. I'm currently, you do not see that. That's interesting. Changed. What did I do wrong? Yeah, it's not.
Probably nothing. Where is the mouse now?
Sorry. So, people entertaining you while they fix the problems. So, 25 plus years of experience in this field. I've been with BT for about 5 years now. I'm not the managing director of BT Security. I'm just the global head of sales. And what I'm going to talk to you today is not something that we sell. Okay, it's an area of research and development for us. We play with different elements of post-quantum cryptography and quantum key distribution. So I'll talk about stuff that the cool people in our R&D department are working with and playing with, and I'll show you some of the use cases that we work with. I think that worked well. The cool thing is I can do it without a deck.
Yeah, well, that's great. So if you have a go without a deck, then at some
point
we're gonna suddenly catch up.
Yeah. So I'm currently the chair of the cyber committee of the Israel-Britain Chamber of Commerce, and as was explained earlier, the co-founder of Leading Cyber Ladies, a global movement that I founded in 2015 together with Karen Elazari, who some of you might know. She's a very famous hacker and a very important woman. And that was for Karen, not for me. BT Security, we are the security arm of BT. About 3,000 security experts that are positioned all around the world. The company itself is active in 180 countries. We have around 15 different commercial SOCs that we use in order to provide services to our customers. And we are considered a leader in the managed security services space. And like I said, I'm going to talk today about something that is not commercially available, right? It's a set of activities that my peers and colleagues, very talented and intelligent people that work in our applied research department work on when it comes to post-quantum cryptography and quantum key distribution. Most of that development is done out of Industrial Park. If you're familiar with England, there is a beautiful town called Ipswich. I'm now in slide number 4. a beautiful town called Ipswich, and right outside Ipswich we have our research center, which is a little small town with a lot of cool stuff that is being worked on. That team benefits from a very nice budget for R&D and innovation of about £2.5 billion a year. This is how much we spend on R&D, so they get to do a lot of cool stuff with it. And a lot of what I will talk to you today was done in partnership with academia and different institutes in the UK and some key universities. No? Okay, that's okay. So as a global network provider, telco provider, clearly we want to connect for good. We want to provide secure connectivity all over the world, and hence the threats, the future threats that quantum shows us, it's a concern for us, and so we have taken steps to address those future threats with what we do with our research department. And so we talked about it right earlier, and it's been repeated all along this evening that the current mathematical algorithms that we use are very good and unhackable with what we're dealing with today, but potentially with future computing power, we will be dealing with exposed algorithms, especially around asymmetric cryptography. And the two kind of key use cases that we were looking at were around PKI, where you see a lot of important asymmetric cryptography, and another use case is the digital signatures as well. And so, again, as a network provider, as a carrier, we today provide secure connectivity, and that connectivity is secured with existing algorithms, mathematical algorithms, that are not based on physics like quantum, but mathematical algorithms that any longer protected in the future. So this is one thing. And another use case that we look at is, again, it's around digital signatures, and if data that seem to be legit and authentic today will be then manipulated in the future, you can change what truth is or what reality is, right? So that's another area of concern and research for us and things that we play with. So we currently run different trials and activities, and some of them are almost commercial, okay, and I'll talk about it, in those two areas of post-quantum cryptography and quantum key distribution. We play with attestation right now. Our research group is playing with attestation. So that's, for example, when we connect devices to the network, we want to make sure that they are configured correctly, that are not misconfigured, and we don't have malicious codes running on them, and so, or that they have not been kind of tempered. And so one of the ways that we are trying to do that with quantum is to leverage quantum safe digital signatures to make sure that when we do device attestation, it is done correctly, and these are quantum proof digital signatures. So this is one thing. Another thing that we research was the usage of, we mentioned earlier today some different NIST kind of checked algorithms. So we are we're checking if you can use commercially available VPN solutions and you can combine them with those algorithms. And then one of the impacts is what will be the latency if you have that. And in one of the trials that we ran, we managed to get what we believe is an accepted latency of about 15% when you apply those new algorithms on top of commercially available VPN solutions. So this is another thing that we did. PKI, clearly another area that I mentioned earlier, and how you can use, for example, post-quantum certificates in order to identify and authenticate users, devices, services that you want to connect. Quantum key distribution, again, we talked about it earlier, it was mentioned, it's about the safe key exchange that you use in terms of encryption. I think you got a question, what if you only need to kind of encrypt the exchange and not the whole thing, and that was interesting. And again, it's to address that case of what if it's basically based on the assumption that with quantum you cannot observe the quantum state without changing the qubits themselves. So you cannot eavesdrop without being noticed. And that's the whole idea behind quantum key distribution, how we want to protect our networks from being eavesdrops and then decrypted. So we are now operating a live trial. We call it the Quantum Network Link. It's basically, it's a 25-kilometer link. I will be over in 5 minutes, it's okay. 25 kilometers of a network link, fiber link, between our Dassel Park facility and Cambridge University. And it's a test bed that we provide to different organizations and academic institutes to run and play with quantum technology and quantum encryption on that link. It's part of a bigger quantum network that we have in the UK that reaches all the way to Bristol. I think there was someone here from Bristol. And so that's part of that bigger network. We also had an interesting smart manufacturing trial that we did where we basically transmitted on in a quantum safe environment. We were using QKD with regular mathematical algorithms for dual resiliency encryption. We used that environment in order to transmit a large set of sensitive data that is used for a very kind of critical, very big asset of manufacturing, something very sensitive and critical that went through very kind of very well and protected. And that was basically some kind of a proof of concept that you can use QKD for smart manufacturing. The coolest thing that we do is the Metronet. Metronet is an available network, QKD network in the City of London that we launched together with Toshiba just about a year ago. And we have what we call a first customer running on it. It's a very known company called Ernst & Young, and they were able to connect their Canary Wharf office to their London Bridge office, and they use it for secure communications. And one of the use cases they're looking at is how they can transmit sensitive data over that network, especially around mergers and acquisitions and other sensitive data that they work on. So we have this live trial that is basically is leveraging our fiber networks and Toshiba QKD hardware for commercial application, and it's already in use by Ernst & Young, been live for about a year. So I will finish here. They're telling me my time is up. But yeah, I think you see that the future is here. We basically need to be protecting ourselves now against future threats that are not necessarily that visible to us, but it's funny times. So thank you. And I apologize for the technical problem.
And I think after you're going to introduce yourself, I'll move on.
Don't you guys hate bios of yourself? They always suck, right? I mean, it's fine. So, hey, I just want to talk about, so the thing I was asked to talk about is about how do you get this done in a national perspective, and I appreciate there's fewest people here at the moment because you probably all want to go home and get your other stuff done. So I will try to keep it as short as possible. I'm a Chief Information Security Officer, so I'm pretty much obsessed with this notion of defense in depth. And that means you assume that stuff is going to break, and you have some compensating control or something else that's going to actually work for you in order to get stuff right. And when it comes to cryptography, this is especially problematic. This is not only problematic for companies, but also for countries. Because the issue is we rely on underlying systems to already be good and viable before we apply any cryptography to protect ourselves, right? So we assume secure hardware, operating systems, protocols, applications, then good crypto, and even then, especially from a national perspective, a sense of threat modeling that we understand what data are we protecting from whom, right? And we have questions that we need to consider. Like we started out with the question of DNA data. Now let's be honest, right? DNA data, that's not just your lifetime that you need to protect it for, if it's your DNA, it's also your progeny's lifetime. And I actually think we have no fucking clue how to do that. right? None whatsoever. We don't know how to do that for multiple lifetimes because we certainly don't know if our current cryptographic algorithms, even AES 256, even, using a good quantum computer with the necessary amount of qubits, we don't know if it's actually pervious to that type of attack. And we don't know if other algorithms will be, like newer post-quantum algorithms, will be able to carry that burden for multiple lifetimes. So we have a fundamental issue of understanding the scope and the scale of the problem. That being said, it is still possible to have not only a national, but in the case of Europe, a European vision about how to look at this whole problem. And the reason that there is a European vision is we didn't limit ourselves to a single cybersecurity thing. I should tell you that I was, until recently, the vice chair of the European Quantum Flagship, which is €1 billion that is dedicated to an area of research. In Europe, we have 3 flagships. We have the Human Brain Project in order to understand the human brain. That's a little challenge. And then the second one is the Graphene Flagship in order to understand the material graphene. And the third one is quantum. So it's a big thing for the European Commission in order to devote that kind of focus and money to a quantum problem. And that problem is really around the notion that there is an opportunity here, not just a problem. And that is a very broad scale. So we really believe for Europe that the national strategies of every single European member state should be around how do we get Europe in a place where we can actually consolidate some of that brain power in order to create advantage and opportunity for Europe. One of our KPIs, for example, is to be the top 2 in the world. Now, you guys heard who the other contenders are. We've got the US, we have China, and we have Europe. So in order to be the top 2, we need to beat out either the US or China. And it's $1 billion, right? Or euros, €1 billion flagship. And the bottom line with this is if we have €1 billion spread out over 10 years and China puts multiple billions per year, it's not going to be a case of the person with the most money wins, is it? The second thing is to really think about how we have a quantum industry that's able to sustain its intellectual property over a long period of time. Because what Europe is really good at is producing kick-ass startups that get then bought by American companies. And this is clearly not something we want to fund for that long-term future. And finally, while saying that, we still want to make it like interesting for funding from all over the place to assist in some of these initiatives going from startup to scale up, et cetera. And the bottom line is to retain this intellectual property for Europe. One of the first things that happened was a high-level steering committee from Europe, and then we started thinking about what is the national vision. Before we had a national vision, I used to be CISO of a telco, so to the telco homies out there, woot woot. So as a CISO of a telco, what we try to do is build this national quantum backbone. So we identified 4 universities that we wanted to work with, and we basically thought, like, this should be like a project for humanity. So this is not about telcos making money. This is about us donating like fiber and, dark fiber to universities in order to figure out how do we actually have this notion of a quantum backbone? How do we look at what type of fiber qualifies for these kinds of experiments? We need to think about dB loss on the fiber. We need to think about distance limitations. We need to think about no interruptions of the signal. So we really thought about okay, we want to do QKD in its initial scale. We started with an off-the-shelf thing with a company called ID Quantique. I'm not trying to make a commercial. I'm just trying to point out we started really easy off the shelf, but we were thinking about how do we make it available for everyone. And one of the biggest things that we worked on together, again, a national vision, was with the National Research Organization, try to come up with use cases that qualify for critical infrastructure. Because let's be honest, if you're going to spend your money on cybersecurity, you're going to start with the important stuff first. That means critical infrastructure. But if you don't understand the use cases for your banking sector, for your telecommunications sector, for sectors like energy and water, why bother? We're not going to spread it thin evenly across the board because there's not enough money to do so. So we start with the important stuff first, and that's where we look at, which quantum technologies can we actually apply? Is it quantum communication? Is it QKD? Is it PQC? Is it some sort of, for Shell, for example, which is a large Dutch UK company, is it actually something like a quantum gravimeter? So we really look at which area of quantum is the most applicable for critical infrastructure. And what that means is that we have this vision. Right? And the vision for the Netherlands was this notion of coming together with the quantum delta. And this has been funded also with several $100 million. And the idea is we want to have elite research. That's where everything starts. Then we make sure that we continuously have an iterative cycle around potential talent. We want to make sure that we're pioneering and that we have produced groundbreaking applications. In this ecosystem, by the way, I know that there are different countries out here, and we talked about the Canadians who are notoriously missing at the moment, but the Canadians don't have a vision, but actually, in terms of applications, have already done some of this. So just because it's not formalized, just because it's not centrally funded, doesn't mean there cannot be national initiatives. So I think there is a combination of both of those things that can be done from a national perspective. So what we wanted to see ourselves as in the Netherlands was this gateway to the rest of Europe, right? And that's kind of going to be like whenever you work on something big, you're going to have all of the smaller parties be like, all right, it's going to happen through us, especially in the Netherlands. So we really wanted to have this focus of how we could have excellence, and this was really through a couple of universities. So we had universities that were specialists in certain areas. For example, the Technical University of Eindhoven, which is in the south of the Netherlands, was focusing truly on post-quantum cryptography. You might know Tanja Lange. She was at Eindhoven. And then Delft was working on quantum computing. So they were looking at the Majorana particle. They were trying to develop with Microsoft new techniques to have a whole new architecture for quantum computing. They had multiple initiatives. University of Amsterdam was working on software enablement. So they have QSoft, which is all of the applications you need to control all of these qubits and to have the underlying operating system for that quantum computer. One of the things I want to say is, from a national perspective as well, there are some really difficult moments because when it comes to cryptography, the defense departments and intelligence agencies usually do not like anything around QKD. Okay, so they focus on saying, let's not worry about that because that's a lot of investment, so we focus our efforts on PQC. That being said, that means still that you need to have an understanding of your crypto assets. The Biden administration, again, did this really well. In December of last year, when they signed in the Quantum Initiative Act, one of the things that they asked for is they demanded that everyone who's supplying the federal government make an inventorization of all of their current cryptography, and that needed to be completed as of May this year. So they gave all of these agencies 6 months' time to figure out which cryptography are you using. I have to ask you, either from a company perspective or a country perspective, do you know? We don't even know which assets we have from an IP, Internet Protocol perspective, right? Asset management is still notoriously horrible in the cybersecurity realm. The fact is that extends as well to our knowledge of our cryptographic assets. And what we do is, if we know what we have, then we need to figure out how we have a transition plan. We talked about Michele Mosca. The 3 questions that Mosca always likes to ask is, how long do we need to keep our data secure? How long is there, do we have before a viable quantum computer? And what is our transition time to go from what we have now to a quantum computing, post-quantum safe state? And the fact of the matter is, because we all suck so much at change, that third part of the equation for me is the most worrying. The best example we have is the transition from IPv4 to IPv6. We're still not there. We're still not there globally. And that's been, multiple decades. So I would argue that that last part of the problem is for us the biggest. For Europe, from a regional perspective, this goal is a quantum internet. And when I say a quantum internet, that means combining the classical elements with the fully quantum elements. So imagine connecting quantum computers in a fully quantum state with a quantum communications link in between them to classical elements as well in a full-blown network that has all the things. And we have been working for years. I showed you the Q-Critical project that was done for the European Space Agency when I was still CISO at KPN. The notion here is that the European Space Agency will also have a low Earth orbit network. So you have Skylight and Cyber, which some of you might know, that is already there trying to do some of the same experiments that were done by Mischius, the Chinese satellite. Except that Mischius is, I don't know if you guys, do you guys know Mischius? Am I saying things? No? Okay, so what it is the Chinese built a, I want to say 2,000 kilometers, but I think now it's 10,000 kilometers network, because it used to be originally between Beijing and Shanghai, but now they've increased the fiber capacity to go all over China, and then they have a satellite in low Earth orbit that can create a fully quantum link. And they've not only experimented that for video calls between China that are fully encrypted, but also between the University of Austria with Zellinger's people. Does this ring a bell? Anyone? No? No. Okay, but if you get a chance, Google it. Sorry? Mischius. Or you can look up Chinese satellite quantum link, Zellinger, Anton Zellinger. Yeah? He just won a Nobel Prize for entanglement. And so what I believe really important from a national perspective is to get our stuff ready for the long term. So at RSA this year, I presented together with Donna Dodson, who is the former head of NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. You can find this online at RSA videos. We did a whole presentation just on getting yourself ready. I believe that this should be a blueprint for every single country on earth. Focus on your defense first. Focus on crypto agility first. And if you do that, you can explore all the other opportunities. Great. You know, that's fine. But focus first on your inventorization of your assets, your transition plan, because I have a fundamental belief. It is not enough to have good algorithms that are tested. It is not enough. I am telling you, we will have side channel attacks, we will have implementation failures, where even with a good algorithm and a good technical specification, we will break it in implementation, because we will take shortcuts. We will find that, for example, we talked earlier about random number generation, we will use a wrong implementation of the random number generator, we'll use other implementation flaws, and then we will put out product. So I urge you to test these things as early as possible. You can start now. You can start now with experimenting with products that are already off the shelf. If it sounds scary, it shouldn't be. The whole notion is it's about testing and failing early. And there is a buyer beware in all of this, so you really need to kind of understand what you're looking at, but please start now. I also want us to get into better shape in terms of evaluating threats. We talked about algorithms that were already broken in round 1 to round 3. Now here's the thing, okay? You might have read about Psych. Did anybody read about Psych being broken? No. Okay, well, you can Google that too. But the point that I'm trying to make is, Psych was actually broken, but I had customers, I will not name them, but they were on that slide of like customers that are already implementing on your slide, like, so they were on that slide. I have customers who asked us, so I heard that other algorithms like Crystals and Kyber are also broken, you know, and that the AI power analysis was breaking another algorithm. This is, it's not fake news, but it's not 100% true either. That could break, like this differential power analysis can break a whole bunch of things. All right? So this is not real. So in order to be able to effectively evaluate, is this a threat or not, we need to be able to get better at discerning some of these information, especially at a national level. Especially at a national level, because it reduces the credibility in some of the applications that we have for all of these technologies. And I know I'm going to run out of time soon, but what I want to tell you is that, look, folks, there are a lot of moving parts. So even when we have algorithms, even when we have products, what we're trying to aim for is this notion of cyber resilience, crypto agility, and first and foremost, supply chain security. All of this stuff is integrated on top of each other. We need to be able to trust the component parts in order to trust complete solutions. So I think you need to start now about thinking about this. I encourage you to do what we did in the Netherlands, which is test beds and demonstrators and accessibility for a large amount of people in order to get us comfortable with failing fast and failing early. So please, check out 2 documents that we put out from the World Economic Forum. One is really on the state of quantum computing, and another one is about how to get to that quantum readiness by looking at, evaluating the threat. Also, find your friends. It's super important to know who to work with in this space. There's probably community support from the specific sector that you're in, so I ask you to do it, and I also ask you all, if you take one thing away from this talk, I ask you all to just get your hands dirty and start playing. It's the best way to learn. There's no scary depth that you are going to fall into. Just start playing. You saw that the products that I talked to you about before. There are VPN products. There are free products. There's open source products. You can already start playing with them. Just start now. Thank you.